Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, Garrett Wolf faces a murder charge over the self-defense shooting of Rayshard Brooks. Now, of course, this is going on during the communist takeover of the United States, including Chaz or Chop or whatever they wish to call themselves. Now, they can't decide on a name because, quite frankly, they're falling apart. They've already gone through one leader, and it seems like they're about to be gone through the second one as well before, of course, eventually falling apart. It shouldn't take too long, but we should be impressed that the communists were able to make it out this long. But let's be frank, if your only source of food and resources is by stealing other people's property, which is what socialism does, then of course you're not going to last very long. But back to the story in hand, as the BBC say here, the Rayshard Brooks shooting, US policeman faces murder charge. So, the police officer who fatally shot Rayshard Brooks, a black man, because, believe it or not, that's actually important now. Yeah, you know how the US is supposed to be a racist country. They're going to put more precedent over black men who are shot, almost as if they're not racist, or if they are racist, it's against white people, but that's hardly a surprise at this point. How the hell can this narrative continue on that supposedly it is anti-black if you look back through any of these people who are supposed to be so saintly and yet have been killed by police through resisting arrest because of previous convictions, because of previous jail time, because of several bad life decisions that they have made that have led them to that point. And then yet another one, possibly their worst one, which leads them to get killed or at least die in police custody. How on earth do you then draw from that, oh, this bad person who died in police custody, that clearly shows racism? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If you wish to talk about systemic racism, maybe you should talk about systemic problems that exist within the communities that are most affected by police. If you wish to go down the race route, then it's the black communities. I'm not going to draw the race card, but if you want to go down that route, I will follow you down and bludgeon you over the head with it, because you are wrong. So yes, as we say, the police officer, Garrett Wolf, has already been fired from the Atlanta police force because, of course, you can't be seen to be doing anything to a black person, which, to be quite frank, is what's going to be continuing to happen, and that is going to either cause police to, A, not want to talk or coordinate or to try to arrest any black person whatsoever, or B, they're going to think, it's really not worth the risk, I'm going to resign, I'm going to find another job while I've still got those prospects, and therefore anybody else who's thinking of joining the police is going to go, no, it's really not worth it. Why the hell would I face life-threatening situations on a weekly, if not daily occurrence, if on the off chance I actually have to defend myself and therefore somebody dies because of me defending myself, I'm then going to be imprisoned for life? Of course they're not going to. Any respect for police that was had before seems to have all gone out the window. And it is one of those things which is such a continued thing in any democracy, which is that things are passed by elected officials, or maybe unelected officials, because that still happens in a democracy, it's not a pure democracy, and therefore the rules are put in place, they're the procedures, the SOPs, the standard operating procedures that people abide by in whatever role, and then something blows up, something goes wrong, and it just so happens to capture the cultural zeitgeist, and therefore is propagated through every media outlet, and suddenly that's at the center of attention, and that is thought to be the worst thing ever. We've seen that, of course, recently well, not so recently, but previously, the main one that comes to mind is the bank bailouts, to say, well, why would you be bailing them out? So, well, that's the standard operating procedure. Well, why is that the case? That's what we've decided over years that it's the right thing to do. Well, it doesn't seem to be. Oh, they're actually being held to account. That makes a change. And the same thing here. They're actually being held to account. And that makes a change. It's the same thing that's been going over for years. Of course, there's a definite difference in those two examples, whereby the example here is something that is backed up by physical, empirical evidence of what should be done in those situations. And believe it or not, they even touch upon it in this story by the blatantly biased corporation, and yet don't realise that they're doing it. Which is, if somebody flees, then there can be other people who are injured in the process of trying to get them under control again. But they don't even mention that as a concern of somebody fleeing. Believe it or not, in the wake of George Floyd's death, they thought, okay, maybe we shouldn't be detaining this person so much. Now they've gone on the run. Now we're going to have to try to get them back under control. Otherwise, it's going to cause harm to other people, other passers-by. They're going to be people caught in the crosshairs. And yet, the BBC doesn't go, almost as if the reason that there was years, if not decades, of reasoning in order to put in place the procedures for what happened to George Floyd were there for a reason, but instead, no, now this one's wrong as well. Like, they can't bloody decide. They have no standards. It is just black people good, white people bad. And that is what we will find out as we read on. So, Garrett Rolfe, who's already been fired, yes, will face 11 charges related to Mr. Brooks' death. They are really trying to nail him on anything that they can. Not for justice, but to appease the mob. Was what he did applicable in the roles of self-defense and law enforcement? Yes, it definitely was. To cut a long story short, this is the bit that matters. The person in question, after Rolfe has called for assistance, resisted arrest. Okay, in which case you need to use more force. However, he then took a taser of one of the police officers. Okay, now he's armed and dangerous. He then tried to shoot it at one of the police officers' heads, thus incapacitating them, possibly blinding them, possibly killing them, as we've seen before in other instances, when it comes to students, I believe it was, that, the taser is lethal. But now, when it comes to a black man shooting it at a police officer, it's clearly non-lethal and not dangerous. Yes, but the idea of a taser is for it to be non-lethal, but it is so that it incapacitates the person that it is shot at. Their muscles are spasming because of overload of electricity, in which case they can't move. That is the point of it. So if you shoot it at somebody who is a police officer, that of course means you can take control of their weapon. Or it means you can go on the run, and at that point, they're right after you, you take hostages, who knows what damage you will cause. As it happens, probably not as much as the fucking communists caused in his wake, but that is something we will get onto. So, they also mention Officer Devin Brosnan, who was also present for the arrest, will be charged with assault for standing on Mr. Brooks' shoulder as he lay dying. Did you know you can be shot and live? Did you know that you can be on enough adrenaline so that even if you're shot, you're still fighting back and very physical? Did you know that even if you've been shot, you can still kill people? Were you aware of that? Because that's actually true. So yes, he's been shot. They've called for medical attention. He's still a danger. By shooting them, who knows what damage has been caused? You can shoot somebody and it might go right through their body. In which case, yes, by all means they'll need surgery, quite possibly to solve the internal bleeding, but they'll definitely live. Or maybe it's gone through more of a vital organ like the heart, in which case they might die. Maybe it's just ricocheted off the ribcage. That's basically the reason for the ribcage. In which case, they probably wouldn't need surgery and it would just be stopping the bleeding. They might want stitches. Otherwise, they'll be fine. Even if they hit the torso, which is bloody difficult in dark, if someone's running, if it's not in a straight line, if it's in a zigzag, they're very difficult to hit because they're unpredictable. You don't know where you're aiming. You just aim for the biggest mass, which is, of course, the torso. You don't know how badly they've been wounded afterwards. That is why, no matter what, you still need to remain in control of the situation. Yes, of course, it would be better if these people were trained on a weekly basis in order to grapple and take control of the culprit of whom they're trying to take into custody. Yes, without a doubt. But in the current situation, because it seems that the police are undertrained, that is what they've been told to do. They are doing their jobs. It's as if you get hired for a job, whatever you want to do. You want to be a... let's pick something very simple then. Somebody at a checkout, and you're scanning things exactly as you've been told to. Great. It comes up to £85. You charge them that. Brilliant. And then you're told that actually there was a change in the offer that, of course, you wouldn't know about, which actually meant something you charged them for like a fifth of the price, and it should have been full price, and therefore you should have charged them £135 or whatever it would have been, short of £50, and now you're fired because you lost the company £50, and therefore you're fired because, well, it should have been £50 more. You weren't aware of that. There was no way that you could have been aware of that. You did exactly what you were told to do, but it resulted in a loss. Therefore, you're fired. And actually, because they lost the money, now it's embezzling, in which case you face a criminal charge, and you could go to prison for that. That is what is happening here. How the hell would this make any sense? Of course it wouldn't, but it is because a white person killed a black person, and now we must fabricate some situations in which we can hopefully make an existing law, otherwise we'll change an existing law in order to make it look like this white person is bad and the black person is good, when that isn't the case whatsoever. Same happened in the George Floyd situation, and the same is happening here. It's a repetition of the same situation, and until these mobs are taken under control, this will keep repeating. So as they say, District Attorney Howard said that 8 videos from the scene show that Mr. Brooks displayed no aggressive behaviour during the 41 minutes and 17 seconds. If you want to talk about de-escalating, then it sounds like the police did a fantastic job. And he posed no physical risk to the officers in that time. Brilliant, the police did an amazing job for 41 minutes and 17 seconds. Oddly specific, but yeah, fantastic. So then, of course, after drink driving, officers tried to handcuff him. Then he struggled. He punched an officer, assaulted a police officer. If you punch somebody, their head lands on the tarmac of the concrete, they're dead. So you're already endangering their life. He then grabbed one of the tasers, turning back to fire it at them as he fled. Again, you're endangering their life. As far as I'm concerned, you just said, I don't have a right to live because I'm trying to take your life. And yet, of course, the family is crying because I understand you've got an emotional attachment to this person. And it's not easy to cut out someone from your life if they are a bad influence. I strongly advise everybody to do so if there is somebody who is a bad influence. And of course, if they're a family member, it'll be far more difficult. And trying to get an objective perspective is incredibly difficult. It is not an easy task. I don't pretend that it is for a moment, for even a second. But if it is the case, and you know it to be the case, but you just don't want to admit it, it's time you act. And it sucks. Maybe you need to write a list. Maybe you need to think things over. Maybe you need to call friends. Maybe you need to talk to them directly and then see what the result of the conversation is. Whatever you need to do, I strongly advise that you do it because you're the product of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So by cutting them out, you will then be a better person almost instantaneously. You won't believe how quickly you project upwards by getting rid of them. Because then they're not holding you back. They're not jealous. They're not suggesting that your success is because of their downfall and now you feel guilty and you're sabotaging yourself as well as them. But instead you're the people who are happy for you and celebrating it and compelling you to move forward in a way that is meaningful to you. That is what you need. So get rid of these people who do not want the best for you, do not want the best for themselves, but is stuck in a depressive cycle. Do not cast pearls before swine, as the Bible says, of course. So, as they go on to say, they show a photo of the gentleman. Brilliant. Now we know who the criminal is. But, moving on, of course, we see, yet again, as I mentioned before, the Wendy's drive-thru restaurant was set on fire over Mr. Brooks' shooting. The Wendy's had absolutely nothing to do with it, and yet they were set on fire. You cannot appease the communists. No matter what, the purity spiral is unending. No matter what you do, you will suffer. As we saw before, liberals get the bullet too, of course. Grown quite infamous now, that is exactly the same as will happen here. No matter who they have an injunction with, anybody else, anybody in the surrounding, will also get in trouble. We've seen the student accommodation where their glass gets broken and they're trying to say, we're on your side, stop, we're on your side. So they don't care. At that point, you're not talking with a sane, rational individual. I mean, you never are if you're talking to a communist. But in particular, when they've got the mob mentality there, they're just going out and it's a free-for-all. Do not think that you can reason with them. This all comes back, always and always will, to personal responsibility. If you give the impression that people are not responsible for their outcomes that they're in, if they're not responsible for the situation they're in, if they're not responsible for the actions that they take, then of course they're going to do things with reckless abandon because they do not think that what they do matters, and therefore they might as well do something that makes them feel better in the short term because long-term consequences aren't important because nothing matters. The communism nihilism overlap is incredible when viewed at in detail, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. So the solution is incredibly simple, which is you're responsible for your own actions. And yes, one of the great ways would be to get rid of the state a bit more in order to say, we're not stopping you from doing what you want to do. Obviously, if you're hurting somebody else, you're violating the non-aggression principle, we're going to step in. I understand that anarchy doesn't appeal to most people, in which case you go with a more minarchism approach, in which case you're just defending laws and borders. So in the situation of you're violating the non-aggression principle, that is where a police force would step in. Funnily enough, believe it or not, that would almost work in an anarchist situation. Because then, although you're collecting taxes, sure, almost everybody, as in the amount who don't consent would be negligible, so almost everybody would be consenting to that. They would understand collective bargaining, that they would get better rates by all submitting to the same pot, all contributing to the same little accrue of money that would then be distributed for their protection. And if you keep it very small, the vast majority of people would consent. And if you've got some people who go, yeah, no, I'd rather live in the sticks and be on my own and not have police protection, they can do that, and that isn't a problem. And then, of course, you'll have some people saying, oh, I don't like my life, I need more money. In which case, in that culture, it'll be, what have you got to offer? I'm more than happy to give you money if you can persuade me that what you're giving me is worth more than the money I'd be giving you. No problem whatsoever. Or you can barter, you can use gold if you want as money instead of fiat currency, whatever you want. Super simple solution, but suggesting that one group, whether it be ethnic or ideological or religious, whatever you want, is oppressed, just gives credence to the idea that you need a savior. And that is where the Democrats, Labour, leftists, large government, statists, whoever, that is where they get their power from, because they are trying to suggest that you, the oppressed, whoever you may be in this situation, are powerless and need somebody else to step in for you. And therefore, despite you being powerless, your vote is worth the same as everybody else. Yeah. There's coherent logic in there somewhere. And that is the only way that they get power. And power is what they're after, because they know that with more power, with more input, they get more money, because it seems as if they're responsible for people doing well, even though they're just stealing. It's legalized theft. Just like lobbying is legalized bribery. So in regards to this shooting, just like Derek Chauvin, I hope Garrett Rolfe goes scot-free. Derek Chauvin, because he did not kill George Floyd. And Garrett Rolfe, because he used self-defense to stop himself being killed by Rayshard Brooks. I understand the family's sad, and I am sorry for that. I do sympathize. But if you're the parents, you didn't do a good enough job, and that is what resulted in your son being a criminal. And you have to come to terms with the consequences of your actions. That is what it means to be an individual. You cannot blame that on larger society. And, oh, we live in a society. That's bullshit. As we see with one final thing, with particularly illegal groups, however you wish to phrase it, moving to a place that has a legal group over time. So you have a few and they wish to assimilate, perfect. Then more, seeing people of their own group, they move there and it no longer becomes self-sustaining, and then it has a big downturn and it's no longer law-abiding, and then it becomes an utter shithole, put simply. And the same goes here. As Michael Jackson said, of all people, if you want to make the world a better place, look at the man in the mirror, make that change. I think I'm misquoting there. Take a look at yourself and make that change. There you go. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that change. Very simple, and should be taken to heart by everybody, specifically these people who are calling for government intervention. But as always, until next time, have a good one.